From orbit, Sereth looked untroubled. Cloud bands curled in soft spirals, oceans shone blue-green, city lights on the night side glowed in orderly constellations, their geometry beautiful from a distance and indifferent to who held power underneath. Closer, the indifference ended. In Vaedras, the capital, Kherrix barracks pressed against old Serethi neighborhoods like metal tumors grafted onto flesh. Gray-green towers draped in Dominion sigils overshadowed low, organic Serethi architecture that curved and flowed with the terrain. Checkpoints sliced across streets that had once been open thoroughfares. Refineries along the outskirts burned through the dark, cracking ore and organics into exportable slurries. Jasik Ra stepped out of the manufacturing halls with the rest of the shift, his throat sore from shouting over the machinery all day. The Kherrix had altered the plant schedule 3 times that week. Shifts stretched, mandatory civic duty hours were tacked on. He had not slept a full night in days. None of them had. He watched the column of Serethi workers file toward the transport lines. Guards in flex armor stood at regular intervals, weapons holstered but obvious. The air smelled of lubricants and ozone and the faint bitterness of fear. Third assembly line seized up again. Someone whispered behind him. "Leave it. If it breaks, they have to fix it," someone else murmured. Jasik heard, cataloged, and filed away. He lived on the tension between what people grumbled and what they dared to say aloud. He knew how to note the difference between fatigue and readiness. At the perimeter gates, Kherrix security checked ident chips and visually scanned each Serethi face. A worker at the front of the line was pulled aside. Jasik saw the argument starting before he heard anything, saw the way the Kherrix officer's posture went hard, one hand resting too comfortably on his baton. "You're short on quota," the officer snapped in Basic, the lingua of the Concord. His accent made the words sound like threats. The Serethi worker stammered that the machines had failed. Logs would prove it. The officer stepped forward as if logs were personally insulting. Jasik tensed, ready to move, wanting not to. They were still too scattered, too alone. The baton struck. The crowd flinched as one. He took a step and felt a hand on his arm. Thaleen Moore's voice reached his ear quietly. "Not now," Thaleen said. "You don't have the numbers. Let me record it." Thaleen's eyes were already lit with the faint shimmer of his embedded lenses, taking in angles and movements, storing them. Jasik forced himself to hold still, every instinct to lunge forward strangled by knowledge and calculation. One more beating, one more bruise on a growing chart. "We'll use it," Thaleen said. "Just not today." Jasik swallowed the rage and nodded. Today they survived. Tomorrow, he promised himself, they would begin to win. On Orionic Pinnacle, at the hub of the Orionic Concord, the violence on Sereth flickered across a hollow wall in compressed form. To Arbiter Thaleen, the images were familiar. Another client world, another administrative custodial force, pushing as far as the Thessian Code allowed. Thaleen's carapace glinted a pale gold under the chamber lights as she reviewed petitions and counter-petitions. Each file was carefully worded, exquisitely polite, and edged with panic. The Serethi Civic Petition Committee alleged cultural erosion, economic exploitation, suppression of dissent. The Kherrix Dominion's reports, equally polished, described necessary security measures and temporary productivity initiatives. Thaleen scrolled to the language of the Thessian Code, its clauses arranged with the precision of a sacred text. She knew them all by heart, but she read again anyway. No military intervention by state or contracted forces on a world under recognized administrative custody unless clear thresholds of atrocity, as defined in Appendix 6, have been met. Sereth did not yet meet those thresholds. The Kherrix had studied the same text and shaped their cruelty to skirt every line. "We cannot send troops," Thaleen murmured, more to herself than to the representatives seated before her. "We cannot authorize private security forces. We cannot contract mercenaries. What do you think I am not seeing?" The Illyri envoy, Seth Aular, raised his head. Above his narrow shoulders, the holographic representation of Sereth floated, turning slowly. "You are seeing exactly what they intend you to see," Seth replied. "That is the problem." Keylor Dralka shifted heavily in his seat, armored plates clicking. His species respected directness. Watching civilians sandwiched into legal limbo offended him on instinct. "Send monitors," Keylor suggested. "We can at least watch them." "We already do," Thaleen said. "The Kherrix know precisely when the monitors arrive and depart. They will not produce the spectacle of atrocity you require while being watched." Silence settled in the chamber for a moment. Then Ambassador Elira Boone, Earth's representative, cleared her throat gently. "There may be another option," she said. The Arbiter turned to her. In the few cycles since Earth's admission to the Concord, humans had made themselves noticed. They were small, short-lived, and argumentative. They fought over semantics as if words were weapons. Thaleen had found it irritating at first, then intriguing. "Another option," Thaleen repeated. Elira's gaze drifted to the Sereth hologram. Her mind flicked back to her own world's history. Protests, strikes, cameras raised at the front lines. Empires toppled not by armies alone but by witnesses. "The Thessian Code forbids military intervention," she said. "It does not forbid tourism." Seth frowned. "Tourism," he echoed. "Cultural exchange," Elira elaborated. "Civilian travel, observers who are not under martial command. Nothing in the code bars unaffiliated individuals from visiting a world under custodial administration." Kellor snorted. "You propose to solve this with vacationers?" Elira did not flinch. Vacationers, volunteers, students, artists, a few retirees with strong opinions. Humans excel at being somewhere they are told not to be. Thaleen's crests shifted slowly, an Illyri equivalent of raised eyebrows. "You believe unarmed civilians will restrain an empire?" she said. "I believe," Elira replied, "that unarmed civilians with cameras, accounts, and the Concord's attention will force the Kherrix to choose between their quotas and their appearance of legal compliance, and I believe humans can be very, very annoying." There was a small sound from Kellor that might have been a suppressed laugh. "What exactly do you request?" Thaleen asked at last. "Approval for a comprehensive tourism and cultural liaison program on Sereth," Elira said. "Earth's NGOs will oversee logistics. Kestrel Horizons will coordinate. All participants will be strictly civilian. No weapons, no uniforms, no pay from any defense agency." Seth's eyes narrowed. "Have you already assembled them?" "We have identified interested parties," Elira said carefully. "Formal approval would allow us to begin arrangements." "Liar," Thaleen thought, with a flicker of reluctant admiration. "You have more than parties. You have a plan." She looked again at the images of Sereth's checkpoints, of Jasic's bowed head, of Tellen's recording eyes. The law she had sworn to uphold had not been meant as a cage. "The Thessian Code was created to restrain war," she said, "not to restrain conscience. I will permit this tourism program, Ambassador Boone, under observation. Any hint of military coordination, and it ends." "Understood," Elira said. Kellor leaned forward. "And if your unruly vacationers provoke violence?" "Then," Elira said, looking directly at Thaleen, "the Code will have to decide whether watching is a crime." Thaleen felt the weight of the decision settle into place like a stone. "Very well," she said. "Send your tourists, human." In a modest, windowless room on New Alexandria Station, Coordinator Malik Roan stared at a wall of displays until his eyes blurred. On one panel scrolled supply manifests and transport schedules. On another, volunteer rosters. On a third, a constantly updating risk map of Sereth, glowing in angry colors where Kherrix enforcement was thickest. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He knew the Thessian Code almost as well as Thaleen did by now, down to the commas. Director Lyra Voren stood at the end of the table, hands folded behind her back, watching him. "You got your approval," she said. "You should look happier." Malik looked up. "Approval to send civilians into an active occupation," he said. "Euphemisms do not make them safer." Lyra's expression did not soften. "No," she agreed, "but what we are doing now is sending them nothing at all." He knew that intangible ache. His people had lived through their own eras of acceptable injustice, shielded by law and apathy. He had joined Kestrel Horizons because he refused to watch that pattern repeat, with his species on the side of the Watchers. "You understand the risk to Earth," Lyra continued. "If you cross the line, even by accident, the Concord will tighten the code around all of us. They will see humans as wildcards who need restraining. If we do nothing," Malik said, "they will see us as cowards who obey unjust rules. I know which judgment I can live with." She studied him for a moment. Malik was lean, his hair threaded with early silver, his eyes carrying the weight of many prior crisis zones. He had been to failed states, disaster corridors, war-torn regions. He knew what happened when cameras left. "Kestrel Horizons is not a military organization," Lyra reminded him. "No," he said. That is our greatest strength. We send engineers, medics, organizers, teachers, people who know how to tilt a system without firing a shot. And this time you will send tourists." He smiled, briefly. "That too." Lyra stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I signed off on this because I believe in it, Malik, but I need you to understand something. The Thessian Code has specific language about actors under martial chain of command. If any of those volunteers start taking orders like soldiers, if you direct them as a unit in a way that can be classified as military, the Kherrix will have the legal ammunition they need." "I understand," he said. "Suggestions, not orders. Itineraries, not operations. Inspiration, not command." "You think words will protect them," Lyra said quietly. "I think words define battlefields now as well as borders do," Malik answered. "We did not write the Thessian Code, but we can make it work for people instead of empires." Lyra nodded once. "Then assemble your tourists," she said, "and try not to start a war while preventing one." The recruitment feed went out across human networks with gentle language. Cultural exchange opportunities on Sereth. Be part of a historic first wave. Experience life on a Kherrix-administered world. Footage showed serene landscapes, colorful markets, Serethi artistry. The guards, the checkpoints, the beatings, those stayed in Kestrel's internal files. Volunteers came anyway, more than Malik expected. In a studio full of lights and plants, Nyla Griggs smiled into her camera. "Hey travelers," she said to millions of followers. "You know I love showing you places with complicated stories, right? Well, this one's a doozy," she explained in broad strokes that humans had been invited to visit Sereth. She mentioned the Thessian Code, the Kherrix, and the controversy, but wrapped it in the language of curiosity and care. "I want to see what's really happening," she said. "Not just what they show officials. I want us to listen to people there. So yes, I'm going. And if you come to learn, not just to gawk." In a training room on New Alexandria, Sergeant Harlan Deek faced a different audience. Former peacekeepers, medics, engineers, students with restless eyes. "You're all civilians," he said firmly. "Say it back to me." A murmur. "Civilians. No matter what you did before," he said. "Here, you are tourists. You carry no weapons. You have no ranks. You attend festivals, concerts, cooking classes. Understood?" Nods. A few skeptical looks. "That does not mean you are helpless," Harlan added. "We'll teach you how to move together in a crowd, how to shield someone without throwing a punch, how to get a bleeding person to safety while looking like you're just panicking like everyone else." Someone near the back raised a hand. "We're supposed to pretend to panic?" "If needed, yeah," Harlan said dryly. "Soldiers draw fire. Scared bystanders draw cameras." In a smaller room nearby, Jinwoo Ri and Tavi Olander laid out devices on a table. Tablets, smart lenses, innocuous fashion accessories. "WhisperNet will use whatever you already carry," Jinwoo explained. "Your navigation app, it's also a relay. The photo backup service, it can route encrypted packets. You'll get daily tourist tips from Kestrel Horizons. Read them. They're not just about restaurants." Tavi, barely older than some of the students, tapped a Pathfinder beacon the size of a credit chip. "These look like battery packs," she said, "or translation dongles. Plug them into public kiosks, coffee shop terminals, transit hub charge points. Don't linger. Don't make it obvious. They'll mesh with each other and your devices. That's our backbone." A woman with gray hair and a union pin on her lapel lifted one between cautious fingers. "And what do we do when they notice?" Irene Callow asked. "Smile," Jinwoo said. "Apologize. Say you were just charging your music device. Most of the Kherrix aren't network engineers." Irene studied the little thing. Her mind was less on devices than on people. She had seen company towns and riot lines. She had watched bosses use police as tools and laws as chains. It did not surprise her that on a distant planet the shapes were the same. She held up the beacon. "If this helps someone on Sereth talk to someone else without being shut up, it's worth the performance," she said. Zoel Mink watched from the corner, tablet in hand. She had been running simulations for weeks. 10,000 humans moving semi-randomly through a city, pausing at attractions, getting lost, congregating at events, each alone, each harmless. Together, a slow tide that changed flows and pressures. Her models glowed in her thoughts. Traffic delays, overburdened checkpoints, cameras always present at every enforcement action, sluggish production lines, nervous khaki-uniformed silhouettes. It would not look like a battle. That was the point. On the Solace Line's bright marketing feed, glossy ships swept past the lens. Book now for Sereth, a voice urged. Limited historical opportunity. Explore a world in transition. Ports filled. The ISS Wayfarer Crown, the largest civilian liner in the fleet, took on more than sightseers. It took on intent. Departure from New Alexandria Station felt like a holiday. The curved windows of the departure lounge showed a spinning arc of stars and stations. Families clustered with luggage. Vendors hawked snacks and souvenir shirts with stylized Serethi script and minimalist Kherrix iconography. The irony was lost on many. Malik moved through the crowd like a quiet current. He paused to watch Nyla rally a group of followers around a kiosk. "Remember," Nyla was saying, "vlogging is fun, but this is not just a backdrop. People's lives are on the line. Don't shove cameras in faces without consent. Don't treat their trauma like content." Her followers nodded. Some meant it. Some, Malik suspected, only half understood. But Nyla meant it, and it showed. He approached her when the group dispersed. "You could have framed this trip very differently," Malik said. "Adventure, danger, ratings." Nyla shrugged. "I like my audience alive and my conscience quiet," she said. "Is it true, though, that us being there actually helps? It makes it harder for the Kherrix to pretend nothing is happening," Malik said. "It gives the Serethi someone to talk to besides each other and Kherrix officials. It creates friction, and if they decide to ignore our cameras," she said quietly, "to hurt people anyway." "Then," Malik replied, "the Concord will see them for what they are. Law likes shadows. We're turning on lights." Nyla nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Lights it is." On the boarding ramp, Harlan Deke scanned faces, his instincts cataloging who moved like they had training and who moved like they had never been near a crisis. He saw former soldiers trying to unlearn posture. He saw idealistic students blinded by courage. He caught sight of Irene stepping onto the Wayfarer Crown with the stubborn gait of someone who had been on a lot of picket lines and had no intention of stopping now. "Ma'am," he said, falling into step beside her, "have you ever been in a confrontation with armed forces?" She gave him a look that made him feel briefly young. "I've had batons swung at me more times than I can count," she said. "Always unarmed, always outnumbered. These Kherrix fellows any different?" "They're bigger," Harlan said. "They have better armor. But fear looks the same in them as it does in us." "Fear?" she echoed. He nodded toward the viewport where Sereth gleamed. "They're terrified of losing control," he said. "Whole empires are. That's what makes them dangerous." Irene's mouth twitched. "Good," she said. "So are we." Karun Syed boarded last, credentials from Galaxy Watch clipped visibly to his jacket. He had negotiated hard for this assignment. A human impulse burned in him that was older than interstellar law, the need to witness and to tell. He took one last look at New Alexandria Station receding behind them as the Wayfarer Crown undocked. The engines throbbed, stars stretched. Sereth grew from a bright point to a small disk. Karun activated his recording rig. "The first civilian wave to a Kherrix-administered world," he began softly, as if narrating to himself. 10,000 humans, no guns, no armor, only curiosity, stubbornness, and a very particular reading of the law. He smiled grimly. "This is going to be a mess," he said, "and it is going to be important." Port Halcyon glittered with efficiency. Serpentine docking arms extended from a central hub. Shuttles moved along pre-programmed lanes with no visible hesitation. Traffic corridors pulsed in colors around the station's exterior, each marking a different class of ship and cargo. Marshal Orrax stood in the main security operations room, hands folded behind his back, watching the inbound manifest scroll. His mandibles clicked once, a tiny sound of irritation. "Civilians," he muttered. 10,000 of them. His subordinates had assured him all the paperwork was in order. The Thessian Code forced him to allow these humans in unless he could prove a clear and present martial threat. He had no such proof, not yet. Prefect Jar Colden entered quietly, indicated by a brief chime that marked his clearance. "Marshal," Jar said, "our guests approach." Orrax brought up the Wayfarer Crown's details. Human registry, civilian, passenger manifest heavy with tourists, aid workers, media personnel. "They will be disruptive," Orrax said. "Civilians always are. But the code binds us. We will manage." Jar studied the display. His skin tone was darker than Orrax's, modeled in a way that suggested mixed heritage and political navigation. "We must remember," he said, that the Serethi petitioners framed our presence here as benevolent occupation. We are civilizing guardians, not conquerors, according to our own public stance. Tourists fit that narrative. Orrax suppressed another click. And privately? He asked. Privately, Jar said, they are a liability. Cameras we do not control, witnesses who do not fear us. But there are ways. He let the implication hang. Orrax's mind moved naturally toward pressure points, workflow, supply chains, rumor, fear. If these humans misstepped even slightly, he could classify them as destabilizing actors. The Thessian Code allowed for emergency measures against such. We will observe, Orrax said. We will document, and when they cross the line, we will move. Do not create the line just to have them cross it, Jar warned. The Concord is watching you as closely as them. Orrax inclined his head. Of course, Prefect. He watched the Wayfarer crown glide into docking alignment, the spill of human life inside like a pulse about to enter his carefully controlled artery. He didn't know yet that among those humans was a man who had spent his life navigating chaos, a woman who could turn a street into a union hall, a teenager who thought of hacks the way others thought of songs, and a tourist whose streams could shift public opinion on 3 worlds in an afternoon. He only knew that something unwanted was arriving, and that he intended to bend it to his use or break it. Disembarkation felt at first like any other port. Customs agents in neutral uniforms scanned passports and devices, baggage carousels hummed, vendors offered snacks with names half the travelers could not pronounce. Then the differences emerged. Kherrix guards, unmistakable in their segmented armor, shadowed the lines. Their weapons hung at easy reach. The air thrummed faintly with the hum of surveillance fields. Malik presented his documents to a Kherrix official and forced himself into the role of patient tourist leader. Purpose of visit? The official asked, voice flat. Cultural liaison and personal exploration, Malik said. Do you represent any military body? No, he replied. I represent Kestrel Horizons, a registered humanitarian and cultural exchange organization, civilian. The official's gaze flicked over his file, noting the tags. Crisis experience, logistical planning, conflict negotiation. You have extensive background in unstable regions, the Kherrix said. Malik smiled gently. I like to travel, he said. Nearby, Nyla breezed through her own checkpoint, chattering cheerfully about how excited she was to film the local markets. Her voice carried just enough for those behind her to hear. I heard there's an amazing street food scene in Vaedras, she told the officer. Is that true? What would you recommend? The Kherrix, unprepared for being asked for tourist advice, blinked. We do not eat in streets, he said, nonplussed. Great, she said. That means there's plenty of room for new trends. Karun Syed watched all of this, recorder running low profile. He noted the way the guards' hands lingered near their weapons when someone spoke a little too loudly, the way Kherrix eyes tracked devices. Harlan came through with a group of younger volunteers, making sure they kept their body language harmless. No squared shoulders, no scanning like soldiers. He joked too loudly about forgetting his sunscreen. The guard relaxed microscopically. Irene had her identification in a small leather wallet, her movements unhurried. Purpose of visit? The Kherrix asked her. Education, she replied. Do you have a sponsor? My pension, she said. And Kestrel Horizons is helping with logistics. The Kherrix frowned. You are quite advanced in years to be taking such a trip. That's why I'm taking it now, she said, before I'm done advancing. The remark made no sense to the officer, which suited her fine. Jinwoo and Tavi, coming through together, had to work harder. The guard scanners pinged on their equipment. What is the purpose of these devices? A Kherrix technician demanded. Jinwoo spoke first, easily. Navigation, translation, entertainment, he said. We get lost a lot. And that? The Kherrix pointed to a small pouch of Pathfinder beacons. Battery packs, Tavi said promptly. You have so many scenic routes advertised. We don't want to run out of power halfway. The technician checked his reference slate. The devices matched civilian specs. Power density within normal parameters. No obvious weapon signature. He handed them back grudgingly. Be mindful, he said. Sereth is under protective administration. Some areas are restricted. Of course, Jinwoo said. We hate going where we're not wanted. Tavi managed not to smirk until they were past the checkpoint. Once all the hardware was through and their people were gathering near the exit, Malik caught Elira Boone's eye across the concourse. She stood among a group of formal diplomats, impeccably dressed, flanked by Concord liaisons. Her expression barely flickered, but there was a brief exchange in that glance. "We're here. We're live. Don't make me defend the indefensible." He dipped his head slightly, acknowledging the weight on her shoulders as well as his own. Then they stepped out through the last station doors and into the light of Sereth. Vaedras greeted them with sunshine that smelled faintly of rain and metal. The city stretched along a river, its older Serethi structures like waves frozen in stone. Arched roofs, flowing lines, colors that shimmered subtly when the light shifted. Between and atop them, Kherrix-built blocks rose stark and straight, draped in banners of dark, saturated hues. The streets near the arrival hub were already adapted for tourism. Holographic signs in basic flash directions. Vendors had quickly learned a few human words. A newly opened Comet brew glowed on a corner, its familiar logo a small slice of earth in alien surroundings. Inside that cafe, Malik claimed a booth in the back while the first wave of tourists dispersed. Groups moved out into the city in loose clusters, some to markets, some to museums, some simply wandering. Zoel's algorithms had fed suggested routes to their devices, labeled as recommended for culture lovers or off-the-beaten-path adventure. Each path was chosen not just for aesthetics, but for what it might gently nudge. In the cafe's corner, Harlan sipped something approximating coffee and watched a group of tourists laugh over pastries. He saw tremors of nerves under the humor. He let them have it. There would be time enough for seriousness. Irene sat at a table near the window, unfolding a small paper guide printed by Kestrel Horizons. On the front, a smiling Serethi artisan of some kind held up intricate carvings. Inside, the text covered basic phrases, cultural courtesies, and a gentle note. If you see something that feels wrong, do not look away. Ask questions, offer help if it is safe, record what you witness. You are not here to save anyone. You are here to make it harder to hide the truth. She traced that last line with a fingertip. Outside, a Kherrix patrol walked by at measured pace. Serethi in the street stepped slightly aside, eyes down. The humans did not notice yet, some distracted by architecture, some by their feeds. Soon, Irene thought. They will. Nyla burst in with her camera already rolling. "Okay, friends," she said. "First impressions. Vaedras is gorgeous. There's this blend of organic flow and harsh authority that you can feel in the stone. We're starting in Skywell Quarter, because that's where you really see how people live. Come on." She caught Malik's gaze briefly, silently asking, "There?" He nodded once. Skywell Quarter had already lit up on Jinwoo's map as a pressure point. Outside the cafe, the first small ripple of human presence hit a checkpoint. A Kherrix guard held up a hand. "Serethi workers, identification," he ordered. Humans, by reflex, reached for their own. He waved them past irritably. They paused, glancing back, seeing the asymmetry. "Wait, are they not allowed here without showing papers?" one tourist asked another, voice low. "Guess not," came the answer. "That's messed up." The human commenter did not realize that his words were in basic and loud enough for a nearby Serethi adolescent to hear. The boy's eyes widened. Aliens, pale-skinned and loud, were noticing what he had long ago accepted as normal. His world tilted slightly on its axis. Up above, on a balcony, Jasek watched the fresh influx with wary curiosity. He had heard rumors from Thaleen of a human cultural program. At first, he had dismissed it, distant diplomats playing games. Then he saw the faces. They came in all shapes and shades, some confident, some patently overwhelmed. Their clothes were bright where Serethi workwear had become muted by years of Kherrix austerity rules. They pointed at things. They laughed. They stopped to talk to street musicians. Jasek felt an unexpected surge of resentment. They stroll through my occupied city like it's a festival, he thought. They get to leave. Thaleen, standing beside him, was more interested in devices. "They're already connecting," he murmured, watching his own overlay light up with nearby pings. "Look, a dozen new nodes just appeared near Comet Brew." "You trust them too much," Jasek said. "I don't trust anyone," Thaleen replied mildly, "but I trust data. If they are foolish, we'll know. If they are useful, we'll know that too." Jasek snorted. "And if they are both, then we will have to do what we always do," Thaleen said. "Adapt." The first real test came sooner than Malik had hoped. It began with a worker at the Skywell transit hub who missed his shuttle. He had been delayed at a Kherrix checkpoint, asked too many questions about a cousin rumored to be in Jasek's orbit. By the time he reached the platform, sweat damp under his work harness, the shuttle doors were closed. "Please," he said to the Kherrix guard, "I cannot be late again. They will mark me." The guard, bored, refused. "Regulations," he said. "Wait for the next." The worker swallowed, hands curling. "I will lose my position," he insisted. The guard stepped closer, hand on baton, voice harder. "Wait," he repeated. On a nearby platform, Nyla was filming a busker using a radiance burst drone to paint light patterns in the air. Her stream's chat scrolled with hearts and comments. Then, in the corner of her lens, she saw the altercation. "Hey," she murmured to her viewers. "Hold on." She turned her camera toward the guard and the worker, zooming in. The worker's plea rose in basic now, desperate, so that others could understand. "They will reduce my rations," he said. "My family." The baton lifted. Nyla did not think. She moved. "Hey!" she called, stepping closer. "Is everything okay here?" The guard turned, annoyed. "Move along, human," he said. "This is internal matter. My viewers are asking," Nyla said, angling the camera so both faces were visible. "Is this normal? Is it allowed under the Thessian Code?" People nearby heard the words Thessian Code and turned. Tourists drifted in, drawn by curiosity and by the subtle pings on their devices as Kestrel's itineraries quietly updated. A few Serethi edged closer, staying at the fringes. The Kherrix guard bristled. "You are obstructing station security," he snapped. "I'm standing in a public transit hub," Nyla replied. "Filming. That's not illegal, right?" Karun, who had been interviewing a vendor on the far side of the hub, killed his previous recording and swung his rig around. Here we go, he thought, adrenaline spiking. He moved toward Nyla, announcing loudly for the benefit of every mic. "This is Karun Syed, Galaxy Watch on Sereth," he said. "We're seeing an incident at Skywell Transit Hub where a Serethi worker is being denied transport and threatened by Kherrix security." Workers on the nearby platforms froze. Harlan's people, scattered in ones and twos in the crowd, did not. A tall tourist with a backpack stepped forward, hands raised, voice calm. "We're just here to help," he said. "No one's threatening you." The guard's attention split. The worker, Nyla's camera, Karun's rig, the growing ring of humans. Thaleen, watching from a vantage point he had chosen for signal interception, felt WhisperNet hum alive as Jinwoo rerouted nodes. He spoke softly into his own mic. "Jinwoo," Thaleen said, "you're seeing this?" "Seeing and archiving," Jinwoo replied from a Comet brew table where he pretended to read a guidebook. "Keep recording." Orrax received the report of foreign obstruction at Skywell and dispatched a squad, more to make a point than because the situation warranted it. By the time his troops arrived, the plaza was full of phones and lenses. The Kherrix squad pushed through tourists who apologized loudly and clumsily, slowing them without deliberate resistance. A child's toy fell, someone dropped a drink, a tourist tripped and grabbed a soldier's arm for balance. All of it utterly deniable as anything but human carelessness. Nyla's stream count spiked as the armored figures came into frame. The guard who had raised his baton earlier gestured. "They are interfering," he said to the arriving squad leader. "They are inciting." The leader scanned the humans. No weapons, no coordinated insignia, no clear lines of command. "Disperse," he ordered, in basic. "We're just waiting for our friend," Nyla replied pleasantly. He missed his shuttle. Karun spoke clearly, eyes flicking from tourists to soldiers to the worker. "To clarify," he said, "you are denying a civilian access to public transport as a punitive measure for alleged workplace infractions?" "This is an internal matter," the squad leader snapped. "Turn off your devices. I am accredited media under Concord law," Karun said. "You have no authority." The squat barrel of a non-lethal projector swung slightly toward him. Harlan's heart rate spiked. His muscles tensed with an almost forgotten reflex. Step in, neutralize, control. He strangled it, remembering Malik's briefing. "No one strikes first. No one strikes if they can help it." He raised his voice. "Everyone," he said, "back up a bit. Give them space." The crowd obediently took one slow step back, not enough to clear a ring, just enough to reduce the immediate pressure. The motion looked organic, but it was the same move Harlan had drilled into them on New Alexandria in crowd safety workshops. The worker, breathing hard, looked from the baton to the faces around him. For the first time in his life, when a Kherrix guard raised a weapon at him, he was not alone. Somewhere in the Orionic Concord's vast data network, a system flagged the simultaneous spike in feeds tagged Skywell Transit, Thalassian for Thessian compliance, and Sereth unrest. It sent a quiet ping to an account belonging to Arbiter Thaleen. Back on Orionic Pinnacle, Thaleen watched the unfolding scene within moments. She saw a baton lifted, a camera focused, a human saying the code's name aloud in the street. "Interesting," she murmured. The Kherrix squad leader, aware now that his actions were likely being transmitted far beyond his immediate jurisdiction, lowered his hand. "All of you," he said through clenched mandibles, "disperse immediately. Worker, you will be permitted on the next shuttle, this time." A murmur went through the crowd. Nyla captured the worker's stunned relief. Karun recorded the grudging climb down. Harlan exhaled slowly. The tourists began to drift away in twos and threes, chattering loudly about how intense that was. And, wow, imagine living with that every day. The worker, eyes wet, looked around for his unseen protector to thank, but the humans had already flow-patterned back into the city's weave. On a balcony above, Jasek turned to Thaleen. "They changed the outcome," he said softly. "Yes," Thaleen agreed. "They did not fight. They did not break anything. They asked questions and pointed cameras." "Yes." Jasek's jaw tightened. "We have shouted and bled and been ignored," he said. "They show up one day, and the Kherrix flinch at a lens." Thaleen's gaze remained on his overlays. "Resent them if you like," he said, "or use them." Jasek was not used to being forced to choose gratitude over pride. It made him feel raw, exposed, but he was a pragmatist before he was anything else. "We will talk to them," he said at last. Thaleen nodded once. "I thought you might say that." WhisperNet, still in its infancy, pulsed quietly as nodes multiplied. The beacons Tavi and Jinwu had planted at Comet brew locations and public kiosks began to mesh. Every tourist phone that had installed Kestrel's Sereth Culture Companion app added one more strand. In a rented room above a small shop, Jinwu sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes unfocused as his interface floated in front of him. "We've got full coverage in Vaedras Central," he reported to Malik. "Skywell Quarter is a little patchy at the edges, but we're working on it. The rural links will take longer." Malik listened, leaning against the wall. "Can the Serethi access it yet?" he asked. "Not directly," Jinwu said. "If they log in from devices tagged in Kherrix systems, they'll be monitored. We're routing initial access through anonymized fronts. Here, look." He brought up a map. Serethi can connect to tourist hotspots to upload local info anonymously, complaints, video, schedules. It all comes to us and to Kestrel nodes back on New Alexandria. We cross-check against other feeds to filter plants. Malik nodded. "We need to talk to someone like Jasik Ross," he said. "Someone who can coordinate on their side." "He's watching us," Jinwu said. "Or at least someone we think as him is. There have been probes. They're cautious." "Good," Malik said. "Caution keeps people alive." He glanced at a feed from Irene, who had stationed herself in a worker district's small square. She was sitting on a low bench, talking to a group of Serethi whose hesitant posture suggested they were unused to being asked for their stories. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, she told them of her own world. "We had factories too," she said, "and company towns where the owners controlled housing, food, and law. People who complained were called agitators. They were watched. They were fired. Sometimes they were beaten." The Serethi exchanged looks. "What did you do?" one asked. "We stopped working all at once," Irene said, "or we slowed down. We insisted on safety checks. We showed up to every public meeting and refused to be quiet. We let others watch. She did not say we threw stones. She did not say some did not come home." "And the soldiers?" another pressed. "Sometimes they stood with us. Sometimes they didn't," she admitted. "But the more people watched, the harder it was for them to hurt us in secret." One of the listeners, a woman with worn hands and sharp eyes, said slowly, "We have no way to show others what happens." Irene smiled slightly. "You do now," she said, nodding toward a nearby tourist with his device in his lap, pretending to read as he quietly streamed the entire conversation to WhisperNet and beyond. In the planetary administration's secure rooms, reports came in of increased chatter and foreigners engaging locals in discussions about labor and rights. Prefect Jar Colden scrolled through them with growing irritation. "They are sowing unrest," he told Orrax. "They are sowing awareness," Orrax corrected. There was a difference in the language of the code. One was illegal, the other was not. Orrax knew the lines as well as Malik did. He would walk along them until the stone wore under his feet. "We could request a curfew," Jar suggested, "limit their movements for their own safety." "We could," Orrax said, but the Concord will ask why. They will demand evidence of a threat severe enough to override civilian freedom of travel provisions. Jar's mandibles tapped. Then manufacture evidence, he said bluntly. A riot, an attack, something. Orrax did not flinch outright, but his nictitating membranes flicked once, a Kherrix tell for disquiet. With respect, Prefect, he said slowly, falsified evidence is dangerous when 1,000 cameras record every angle. Then we create an incident where the angles serve us, Jar said. You are security. Secure our position. Orrax nodded slowly. I will consider options, he said. He left the room with his mind already turning toward shadows. If he could not keep the humans from shining lights into places he preferred dark, perhaps he could trick those lights into illuminating a scene of his own design. As days passed, Sereth shifted, molecule by molecule. Tourists filled Comet Brew locations, chatting with locals. Some came with genuine simple curiosity and left with heavier hearts. Others had always intended to do more and looked only for the first opening. Nyla's streams began as travelogues and became something else. She could not resist the human stories in front of her. Here's Yaron, she said one morning on a crowded street in Skywell Quarter, panning to a Serethi craftsman beside her. He makes these incredible carved stones, but look at this. She held up one with a design stamped over his own work, a Kherrix crest, crude and heavy. They made him add nationalist symbols to his art to sell it officially, she explained to her viewers. If he refuses, he loses his permit. The chat exploded in outrage. Nyla did not call for boycotts or for action. She simply showed Yaron's face and his resigned shoulders. Later, she received a notification from Kestrel Horizons. Yaron's segment had already been clipped and resent onto Concord cultural channels by unknown hands. Pax Hollis, a gamer more comfortable behind screens than in crowds, found his niche too. He gathered Serethi kids in city plazas and taught them cooperative games under the pretense of play. They learned to move as clusters, to pass signals unnoticed, to practice feints and retreats. It's like a raid, he explained, half joking. Boss mechanics. You don't face them alone. You stay spread enough that one attack doesn't hit everyone, but close enough to help your neighbor. The kids ate it up. Their parents, watching from the sidelines, recognized something else, training that prepped bodies to dodge batons and protect one another. Irene's quiet conversations bloomed into networks. She suggested regular tea mornings at Comet Brew, ostensibly for cultural exchange. Serethi workers came for free drinks, stayed for stories about collective bargaining and mutual aid. At each gathering, she made sure someone new spoke. She asked them questions that nudged. Who decides your shift length? What happens if enough of you say no? How many others feel the same? Most importantly, she listened. She made notes of recurring names and grievances and passed them, with permission, to Malik. These people are ready, she said about one group from a plant on the city's edge. They just need a spark and a sense they are not insane for wanting better. While the human presence made things messy on the ground, their images made things messy for the Kherrix elsewhere. Karun's reports on Galaxy Watch pulled no punches. Today, he told his viewers, we watched a Kherrix officer back down from beating a Serethi worker, not because a law changed, but because humans with cameras happened to be nearby. Ask yourself what happens on the days when no one is. He did not hide humanity's role, nor did he glorify it. We are not heroes, he said in one segment, filmed in a narrow alley with fresh propaganda posters behind him. We are an inconvenience. Sometimes that's enough to shift a balance. On Orionic Pinnacle, Arbiter Thaleen watched Karun's feed late into her equivalent of night. Next to legal briefs and economic charts, his raw footage felt like another kind of evidence. Less formal, perhaps. No less valid. She saw Irene's face, weathered and fierce, telling a Serethi group about a century-old labor strike on her world. We didn't win everything, Irene said, but we made it impossible for them to pretend we were happy cattle. Thaleen curled her limbs under her, unsettled. The Thessian Code had not contemplated such actors. It spoke of armies and fleets and mercenary corps. It said nothing of retired organizers and vloggers. Maybe it should have, she thought. Orrax's patience thinned as his reports soured. Productivity metrics slipped, incident logs multiplied. The Dominion High Council sent sharp inquiries. He could not yet point to true rebellion, but he could show a rising frequency of public disorder events temporally linked to human tourist clusters. Disorder was still legal in Concord eyes, but if he could paint it as organized destabilization, He met with his inner circle in a secure sublevel. They sat around a low table, armor muted in deference to private discourse. "We will stage a breach," Orrax said. "A bombing at a supply depot near Skywell Quarter. We will ensure evidence points toward human agitators." One of his officers, younger, shifted uneasily. "If the Concord uncovers it." "They will not," Orrax said. "Our special unit will plant devices with appropriate human signatures. We will arrest a handful of noisy humans, nothing more. Enough to demonstrate that they are not harmless. The Concord will accept a narrower tourism program with stricter limitations." The room hummed with low agreement. Fear of loss does that to organizations. "And if," another ventured cautiously, "the humans' own videos show something else?" Orrax's mandibles spread in a tight, cold approximation of a smile. "We control access to the depot," he said. "No tourists will be close enough to see. Only what we choose to show will be shown." It was a calculated gamble. Orrax believed in his ability to shape reality by controlling lines of sight. He had not accounted for WhisperNet's habit of worming through cracks. The explosion at the cargo depot shook Skywell Quarter like a giant's fist. Windows rattled, dust billowed, sirens wailed in a dozen frequencies as Kherrix units converged on the site. Karun, interviewing a shopkeeper nearby, felt the shockwave in his bones. That was not an accident, he thought, grabbing his rig. He ran toward the smoke, ignoring Harlan's shouted curse behind him, muscles moving before caution could catch up. At the depot perimeter, Kherrix soldiers raised barricades fast. "Evacuate," one yelled at him. "Leave the area. I'm accredited press," Karun said, even as he knew how flimsy that was here. "What happened?" "Security incident," the soldier snapped. "Controlled." Behind the barrier, through gaps, Karun saw crumpled forms. Kherrix, their armor scorched. He saw twisted metal. He smelled the acrid tang of burned composite. He also saw something else, for a fraction of a second. A Kherrix unit in a different cut of armor, marked with a symbol he did not recognize, moving away from the blast site long before the regular security squads fully arrived. His camera caught a fragment of that movement, blurred by smoke. Later, Jinwoo would pause the frame and curse softly. At that moment, Karun only knew that something felt off. Nearby, Pax stood frozen, his rental camera case in his hands, eyes huge. "I didn't do anything," Pax muttered. "I was at the arcade." "No one is accusing you," Harlan said, materializing at his shoulder, voice low and steady. "Not yet. When the Kherrix arrests began, they came fast. A squad moved into a comet brew, where several of the more visible human streamers liked to gather. "You," the squad leader barked at Pax, "and you," at a young woman known for provocative commentary, "and you," at a middle-aged man who had argued loudly with a Kherrix officer 2 days prior. "You are under detention for investigation." "What for?" Pax stammered. "Evidence links human agitation to an act of sabotage," the leader said. Karun's stomach sank. Malik arrived too late to stop the detentions. He arrived just in time to lock eyes with Orrax, who had come personally to oversee this part of his plan. "These are civilian travelers," Malik said coldly, "under Thessian Code protections." "They are suspects in a security incident," Orrax replied smoothly. "The same code allows us to detain those who may pose a threat to peace." Karun lifted his rig. "Marshal Orrax," he said, playing to the room, "do you have evidence that civilians with cameras planted explosives in your depot?" Orrax's gaze flicked briefly to the recording device, then back. "The evidence will be presented to the proper authorities," he said, "not to your audience." Malik stepped closer, spreading his hands just enough that observers could see he held nothing. "You are making a mistake," Malik said. "Detaining humans without transparent cause will not play well on Orionic Pinnacle." "You presume too much, human," Orrax said. "The law is on my side." He turned to his troops. "Take them," he ordered. As Pax was dragged away, he met Malik's eyes with a look of bewildered betrayal. "I was just playing games," he said hoarsely. "I know," Malik answered, "and I won't let them bury that." Orrax's plan was underway, but as he had feared, the angles did not all belong to him. Jinwoo and Tavi holed up in their rented room, feeds surrounding them in a dizzying array. "We've got the before, during, and after," Tavi said. "Look," she tapped sequences into her console. On one side of the screen, footage from a tourist drone showed the depot area hours before the blast. Ordinary activity, cargo transfers, routine patrols. On another, a reconstruction from WhisperNet nodes captured faint signals. a Kherrix unit with unmarked equipment entering the depot through a side access. The timestamp indicated this happened without any civilian presence close enough to see. Then, from a distant accidental angle, a blurry shot from a kid filming light patterns, a sharp flash, sound delay, smoke plume, and, crucially, unmarked units exiting via a back access seconds after the blast, before regular security converged. They did it themselves, Tavi whispered, cold anger coiling in her chest. They bombed their own depot. To blame us, Jinwoo said, jaw tightening. We need to package this, Tavi said. Clear, chronological, undeniable, and we need Karun to front it, Jinwoo added. He's their voice. If he says it, they'll listen. He tagged the reconstructed footage with parity checks, location hashes, and WhisperNet's distributed verification stamps. It would be harder to dismiss as deepfake when dozens of independent devices corroborated. Jinwoo forwarded the bundle to Malik and to an encrypted address on New Alexandria Station, where Kestrel's legal team and the Terran Mediation Bureau sat waiting. Within hours, a ping landed on Elira Boone's console on Orionic Pinnacle. She watched the composite, eyes narrowing, then leaned toward her comm. "Connect me to Arbiter Thaleen," she said. It was late in Thaleen's personal cycle, but she answered. "Ambassador Boone," Thaleen said. "I assume this is urgent." "It is," Elira replied. "Humans have been detained on Sereth under suspicion of sabotaging a Kherrix facility. We have evidence that the incident was staged by Kherrix units themselves." "You are certain?" Thaleen asked. Elira forwarded the file. "I am as certain as a person can be with this kind of data," she said. "Multiple independent devices, time-coded. If this is not real, then reality itself is broken." Thaleen opened the file. Her eyes moved quickly. "Staged or not," she said after a moment, "the Kherrix have authority over security measures. They do not have authority to invent crimes to justify suppressing civilian presence," Elira replied. "That would be a misuse of the code." Seth Allar, summoned by an alert on his own station, joined the channel. "What is this?" he asked. "A breach at a depot on Sereth," Elira said, "and an attempted frame of my people." Kaelor Dralka, woken from his rest by a different priority alarm, flicked his own console open. "You sent them civilians," Kaelor said. "The Kherrix send back prisoners. Predictable." "We have visual evidence the Kherrix staged the incident," Elira insisted. Kaelor examined the footage. Though no soldier himself, he knew the pacing of operations, the way unmarked units moved, the timing. It smelled of an internal job. "Interesting," he said. "That will not sit well with Concord observers." Thaleen considered rapidly. "The Thessian Code is not explicit on civilians used as pretexts," she said. "It assumed good faith." "Then perhaps it is time to test that assumption," Elira said. "I am filing an emergency petition. Kherrix actions threaten the integrity of the code." Seth frowned. "You argue from high ground, Ambassador, but be careful," he said. "If the Concord decides that sending tourists is effectively weaponizing civilians, we may limit such travel in future." Elira's mouth tightened. "If you decide that," she said quietly, "then you will have made it official. Law here exists to protect empires, not people." That accusation hung in the air. Thaleen, who had sworn to a different belief, felt its sting. "File your petition," she said. "I will convene a hearing." As she ended the connection, she wondered, not for the first time, whether the words she had guarded all these cycles were finally meeting the reality they deserved, or being exposed as the shell they had become. On Sereth, fear and anger twisted together in the tourist circles. "They took Pax," Nyla said, pacing a Comet Brew floor as though motion itself would bring him back. "He's just a kid. He plays games." "They took 3, Harlan corrected, voice flat. "Him, Sana, and Miro, all of them loud online, none of them anywhere near the depot when it blew." "We have proof," Tavi said, arriving with Jinwoo and Malik. She explained, quickly. Nyla felt a rush of relief. "So they can't just—" "Of course they can," Malik said gently, "but we can make it cost them." He looked at Harlan. "From now on," he said, "no one goes anywhere alone. We increase our presence at every public enforcement action. Our goal is not to get arrested. Our goal is to make it impossible for them to justify more arrests." Harlan nodded curtly. "Already done," he said. "The hiking groups are doubling up, safety in numbers and all that." Nyla stopped pacing. "What if they come for me?" she asked, quieter. "Then we'll have to assume the risk threshold has shifted," Malik said. and so will the conquered. His assurance did not entirely soothe anyone, but it gave them something to hold. In Skywell Quarter, Jacek heard about the detentions and the depot blast in the same breath. So they hurt their own to hurt us, he said, teeth bared. Thalen's hands danced over a portable console. They hurt their own to hurt the humans. Indirectly, Thalen said. We are an unpleasant side effect in their calculations. Jacek wanted to throw something, break something, shout. Instead, he forced himself to sit across from Malik in the back room above Comet Brew when the human invitation finally came. Up close, Malik looked more tired than the feed suggested. His shoulders carried hundreds of unknown decisions. You have stirred the nest, Jacek said without greeting. We never pretended otherwise, Malik replied. You came without weapons, and yet the Kherrix panic, Jacek went on. You carry cameras, and they behave as if you brought guns. Malik let out a short, humorless laugh. We have discovered, he said, that sometimes cameras are more threatening to tyrants than guns. Guns they know how to answer, images they have less practice with. Thalen watched both men, weighing. What do you actually want? Jacek asked. For us to behave nicely in front of your audiences? No, Malik said. I want you to survive long enough to choose your own path. Jacek leaned forward. Surviving while they take everything, he said, is just a slower kind of dying. I know, Malik said. My people have done both. We got tired of the second. He spread his hands. We cannot legally bring you weapons. We cannot legally train you to fight. The Thessian Code is very clear on that, but it does not forbid us from standing next to you when you stand up. It does not forbid us from recording what happens. It does not forbid us from telling everyone else. And when the Kherrix shoot us both? Jacek asked. Then the code will be forced to look at itself, Malik said, and so will everyone who wrote it. Jacek sat back, exhaling. You expect us to trust you, he said. I expect you to use us, Malik corrected. Trust is a bonus. You do not have to like us. You can be furious. It took so long for anyone to come. I would be. But we are here now. Pretend we are a tool that fell from the sky. The question is not whether you like the tool. It is how you will use it, Thalen interjected, calm. We can coordinate timings, he said. Our data shows where Kherrix deployment is heaviest, where it is thin. Your models, Zoel Minx, show where you can place tourists to maximize visibility. If we schedule our protests and slowdowns to coincide with your cultural events, we increase the cost of repression. Jacek considered. We have been cautious, he said. Small actions here and there. We feared triggering a crackdown our people couldn't withstand. You were right to fear it, Malik said. But the conditions are changing. The Kherrix can no longer move in secret. Every baton they swing at you now, they risk swinging in front of half the conquered. Jacek's hatred for the occupation had always burned steady, but now another feeling intruded, something like fragile hope and bitter amusement. You humans, he said, you found a way to turn being nosy into a strategy. It's what we do, Malik said. We argue. We stick our noses where they don't belong. We make rules and then test what happens when we bend them. Sometimes it works. Jacek extended a hand across the table. We will plan together, he said. But understand this. This is our world. Our revolution, if it comes, is ours. You are guests. Malik clasped his hand. Guests, he agreed, but very stubborn ones. In the weeks that followed, Sereth saw a new kind of demonstration. It did not begin with barricades. It began with checklists. At a factory on the city's edge, Serethi workers arrived as usual to find laminated posters in the break room. Health and Safety Day, they read in cheerful fonts, with Kestrel Horizon's logo at the bottom. A cultural exchange initiative, co-sponsored by Comet Brew. Curious and wary, they gathered as Irene and a handful of tourists explained. On my world, she said, companies eventually had to agree to regular safety inspections. Equipment had to be checked, procedures documented, regulations posted. It slowed production, sure, but it also saved lives. She held up a form. We thought we'd share that tradition with you, she said. As guests, Kherrix supervisors watched from a distance, suspicious but unable to object. The Thessian Code contained clauses about occupational safety copied from ancient regulations on member worlds who had once valued such things. Denying health and safety initiatives would look terrible. Everywhere, humans pulled measuring tools from their bags. They checked ventilation slats, emergency exits, the placement of fire extinguishers, the condition of lifting equipment. They asked workers questions. Does this ever overheat? Does this guard ever fail to close? Has anyone ever slipped here? If the answers suggested risk, the checklists marked it, and the procedure, carefully printed, stated clearly, unsafe conditions must be addressed before full operations resume. Jessic watched the first shift of the day stretch into hours of testing and discussion instead of productive output. He grinned, a sharp thing. "They are using your own rules against you," he said aloud to a sullen Kherrix foreman. "How educational?" The foreman hissed. "These are delays," he said, "non-essential." "You signed the Concord's codes too," Irene reminded him, "safety clauses and all. We can send you copies, if you mislaid them." At other work sites, similar scenes unfolded. In rural outposts on Serethi and North Ridge, tourists helped check machinery, clogging up processing. WhisperNet tallied every delay. Kherrix superiors reported to Jar that quotas were not being met. "You wanted deniable pressure, Orrax," Jar said bitterly in a private call. "Now our own signed commitments to safety are strangling us. They will push too far," Orrax said. "They always do. Then we will have cause to tighten conditions." But as he spoke, he knew his time was running shorter. The Thessian hearing loomed on the horizon like a storm. On Oranic Pinnacle, the session convened. Arbiter Thaleen presided from her central seat. Elira Boone stood to one side. Opposite her, the Kherrix delegation's lead legal officer wore an expression carefully smoothed into blandness. The chamber's holoscreens displayed the agreed-upon footage: Skywell Hub's earlier confrontation, the depot blast reconstruction, the detentions, the health and safety inspections. "We are gathered," Thaleen began formally, "to determine whether Earth's civilian presence on Sereth constitutes a violation of the Thessian Code, and whether the Kherrix Dominion's response has remained within the bounds of that code." The Kherrix officer spoke first. "Earth has weaponized its civilians," he declared. "They coordinate, they disrupt, they incite. They may not carry guns, but their impact is strategically comparable to a soft invasion." "Our people are on vacation," Elira said calmly. "Some are volunteers, some are medics, some are retired. None of them wear uniforms. None of them are paid by any military. The Thessian Code is specific. It bars military intervention by state forces, not the presence of noisy tourists. Their actions have reduced output, incited protests, and endangered stability," the Kherrix went on. "We staged no incident. The blast was sabotage." Thaleen's gaze sharpened. "We will examine that claim," she said. "Ambassador Boone, your evidence." Elira had known this moment would come. She gestured, and the reconstructions Jinwu and Tavi had assembled appeared. "Multiple independent feeds," she explained. "Time-stamped, location-tagged. WhisperNet's distributed verification signatures show these are not doctored." The chamber watched as unmarked Kherrix units entered the depot, the explosion followed, and then those same units emerged before regular security. Keller Dralka spoke up, his voice rough. "In my culture," he said, "if one of my commanders did this, he would be stripped of rank and exiled. You do not fake attacks on your own to justify discipline. It is dishonorable." The Kherrix delegate's mandibles stiffened. "We dispute the authenticity of these files," he said. "Then bring your own," Elira said. "Your own cameras. Surely you have full coverage of your own depots." There was a charged pause. "Our internal security records are classified," the Kherrix said. "Convenient," Seth Allar murmured. Thaleen folded her limbs. "The Thessian Code is founded on the assumption of good faith," she said slowly, "on the notion that its signatories will not violate its spirit while obeying its letter. What I see here is a letter twisted into a garrote." She turned to Elira. "Your tourists, however, are not passive." "No," Elira said. "They never are. Humans are, as Keller has kindly noted in this chamber before, infuriating. We ask questions, we show up, we record, we help people sit down in places they are told they cannot sit. That is not war, that is witness. If every empire in this chamber decides today that filming and asking questions is equivalent to military aggression," she continued, "then you will have announced to the galaxy that the code protects power, not people. I do not think you want to admit that." Seth shifted, troubled. He thought of Illyri cities where small protests had led to reforms long before his birth. Keylor, thinking of his own civilians, added, "If we let the Kherrix declare every civilian presence hostile, They will be able to clear witnesses from any future field of battle. I will not support such a precedent. Thaleen looked at the faces before her, then at the silent hollows of Serethi streets behind them. This is larger than Sereth, she realized. The law they shaped now would echo. We will deliberate, she said, but know that the days of interpreting silence as consent may be ending. As the chamber emptied for recess, Elira finally let herself sag against a support column, hidden from the main cameras for a second. We've thrown the stone, she thought. Now it falls. On Sereth, events outpaced deliberations. Orrax, feeling his control slip, gambled once more. He authorized a series of internal relocations in Vaedras, moving Serethi families from Skywell Quarter to newly built compounds on the outskirts, away from tourist-saturated zones. Officially, it was for urban development and modern housing. Unofficially, it was to separate the restless from their inconvenient shields. WhisperNet picked up scraps of the orders from misrouted packets. Thaleen and Jinwoo stitched them together. They're going to empty Skywell Quarter, Thaleen told Malik bluntly. At least the densest parts. Once our people are out there, alone, they can do what they like. Malik felt a chill. How soon? He asked. Transports start within 2 days, Thaleen said. Maybe sooner. They want to get it done before Concord observers arrive. Then we don't have 2 days, Malik replied. We have now. He convened a hurried council in the room above Comet Brew. Jasek, Thaleen, Irene, Nyla, Harlan, Jinwoo, Zoel. We can't fight their transports, Harlan said. Not directly. They're armored. They're armed. We're not turning this into a shooting war. We won't, Malik said. We're going to clog them. Irene nodded slowly. Crowds, she said. Crowds, Malik agreed. Music, markets, human bodies in every loading zone they try to use, tourist festivals spontaneously happening in relocation areas. Nyla's eyes lit as fear and determination warred in her. You want me to throw a party on a forced migration route, she said. More than one, Malik said, and stream every second. Jinwoo, can you hit the special planning button? Malik asked. Jinwoo grimaced. You mean the chaos tourism escalation? He said. Already deploying. You'll see it in their apps, overnight events, secret shows, locals-only pop-ups. They'll go where we nudge. Zoel tapped her screen. I'll update the models, she said. We need maximal density where relocation buses will stage, but not so dense they can plausibly claim crowd control emergencies. Harlan, Malik said. Your people? Every exercise class we've been running? Harlan said. Those are now dance rehearsals. We keep formation training, but we add music. Jasek leaned back, feeling the old thrill of a plan. We will call for community gatherings too, he said. Skywell Quarter will not empty quietly. We'll put our own bodies in those roads. Thaleen added, we'll file formal complaints through Kherrix offices. If they ignore their own bureaucratic steps, that's another strike in Elira's case. Irene looked around at the strange coalition. Human tourists, Serethi organizers, a teenager with code in her fingers. Too many times in her life she had felt powerless in the face of armored men. Now, for the first time, she saw a way to turn weight into protection. All right, she said. Let's go teach an empire how to dance badly. The day of the relocations dawned like any other, except for the music. In Skywell Quarter, Radiance burst drones hovered above squares and alleys, pulsing colors in rhythm. Comet Brew had announced a cultural marathon, 20 hours of continuous performances, free drinks for anyone who joined. Serethi children painted their faces. Human tourists wore shirts emblazoned with Serethi designs. Stalls popped up selling snacks, crafts, and homemade banners inked with slogans pulled from Irene's stories and local imagination alike. Jasek moved through the crowds like a conductor. He signaled quietly to group leads, urgent glances disguised as friendly smiles. When the first Kherrix transport convoy approached, the road it needed to turn down was full of dancers. Marshal Orrax watched from a mobile command unit, mandibles tight. Disperse them, he ordered. Inform them that unauthorized gatherings obstructing security operations are forbidden. Kherrix troops moved in. Excuse us, one barked to Harlan's nearest formation. Clear the road. Oh, sorry, Harlan said, breathless from faux laughter. We were told this was a public thoroughfare. Didn't see any signage. The troops tried to push, but every human they touched stumbled theatrically. bumping into others, spilling drinks onto their own boots, creating pockets of minor chaos without ever landing a blow. Tourists apologized, laughed, picked each other up. Cameras remained conspicuously high, recording. Serethi on the edges watched. Some laughed nervously, some with genuine delight. Orrax's temper simmered. "Use non-lethal dispersal," he said. "Foam, gas, drive them off." "Sir," his aide said nervously, "Concord observers have just arrived in orbit. The injunction regarding crowd control." Orrax hissed. "They are obstructing critical security movements," he said. "We have justification." He failed to notice that his words were carried, through a bug in his comm system WhisperNet had long ago exploited, to a small device on Thalen's person. Thaleen relayed the order, and within moments, Malik knew what was coming. "Masks," Malik snapped to Harlan over a secure channel. "Gas incoming." Harlan raised his arms and shouted, "New dance! Everyone get low!" The tourists laughed and copied him as if it were choreography, dropping into crouches at the same time the first wisps of irritant gas drifted over the crowd. They pulled simple masks from bags and pockets, ostensibly dust filters for city pollution, and covered their faces. From the outside, it looked like part of the performance. Serethi nearby coughed, eyes streaming. Humans moved to them, pressing spare masks into their hands, lifting scarves and cloths over their mouths. Karun's feed captured the shimmering cloud wafting over a sea of bodies. "Concord," he addressed his remote viewers. "This is what Kherrix crowd management looks like when foreigners are present. Imagine what it is when they are not." The transports rolled to a halt behind the mass of people. They could not move without running someone over. Orrax's drivers waited for an order that did not come. He had no desire to watch his career dissolve in a hail of footage showing armored vehicles plowing through tourists and children. "Call off the relocations for today," Jar's strained voice came over the line. "We cannot afford this now." Orrax's hands clenched. "Prefect," he began. "That is an order," Jar snapped. Orrax swallowed the rage, swallowed the humiliation of backing down in front of those he considered inferiors. "Stand down," he said. "Withdraw transports. Reassess." The convoy retreated like a wave washing backward. In the streets, cheers erupted. Radiance bursts exploded overhead, painting the sky with colors not even Serethi had names for yet. Jasik turned in a slow circle, taking it in. "We held them," he thought, almost disbelieving. "Not with guns, with bodies and noise." Beside him, Irene smiled through tear-wet eyes. "Feels familiar," she murmured. "What does?" he asked. "The moment when they realize they cannot just do whatever they like anymore," she said. "It's always beautiful and terrifying." On Orionic Pinnacle, Arbiter Thaleen watched the live feeds of gas, music, and retreat. She called the hearing back into session ahead of schedule. In the chamber, Alira stood once more, tired but steady. "You have seen," she said, "what happens when unarmed civilians refuse to make repression easy. You have also seen the Kherrix attempt to remove those civilians under false pretenses." The Kherrix delegate protested, but the room was not with him. Thaleen's voice was clear. "The Thessian Code was not written to be a veil for staged crises," she said. "Nor was it written to equate presence with aggression. Civilian travel, observation, and peaceful assembly are not military acts." She raised her head. "This tribunal finds that Earth's tourist and cultural program on Sereth does not constitute military intervention under the Code as it currently stands. It further finds that the Kherrix Dominion has violated sections concerning the treatment of non-combatants and the good faith application of internal security exceptions." The Kherrix delegate bristled. "You cannot dictate how we administer our territories," he said. "Oh, but we can," Killer Dralka said softly. "That is the point of a concord." Thaleen continued, "We will not authorize military force against the Kherrix on Sereth at this time, but we will deploy Concord enforcement observers to monitor compliance with new requirements. Mass relocations are suspended. Labor protections will be implemented. Serethi representation will be increased. Failure to comply will result in sanctions and a reconsideration of Sereth's custodial status." Seth added, "We will also begin drafting amendments clarifying protections for civilian observers and humanitarian actors under the Code." Alira felt something loosen in her chest. It was not full liberation. It was not the clean, decisive victory some might have wished for. It was, like most human progress, a step won by argument and embarrassment. "We have carved out a space," she thought, "small but real." She sent a coded message to Malik. The code did not crush us. It bent. News of the ruling spread through WhisperNet and into Sereth's old networks within hours. In Skywell Quarter, Serethi and humans read the summaries in crowded cafes and cramped apartments. Jasek listened as Thaleen explained. "They are not giving us independence," Jasek said. "No," Thaleen said, "but they are putting the Kherrix on a shorter leash. And they have made it legal now for humans to be what they already are here, witnesses who cannot be easily removed." "That matters," Irene said. "It means if this spreads to other worlds, they have a way to insist on being seen too." Nyla checked her device and laughed softly. "I'm already getting messages from people on 3 planets," she said, asking how to invite tourists to their homes. Malik exhaled, feeling for the first time in weeks that the ground under him might hold. "Do not think this is over," he warned. "The Kherrix will adapt. They will seek quieter ways." "Of course they will," Jasek said. "So will we." Outside, Kherrix patrols moved with a new stiffness. They still carried weapons. They still held positions of imposed authority. But for the first time since they had come to Sereth, they looked up at lenses and wondered what those images would cost them. Marshal Orrax received his recall orders in a sealed packet. He read them, face expressionless. Prefect Jar Colden stood across from him, trying not to look relieved. "You are being made an example," Jar said. "Someone had to be," Orrax replied. He did not argue. He knew the game. Empires assuaged oversight by sacrificing individuals. He had thought himself more valuable than that. He had been wrong. As he left Sereth, shuttled quietly onto a Dominion craft, he cast one last look at the planet below. For all his mistakes, for all his arrogance, he understood something instinctively. This had been a turning point. Not because of guns, but because of an unacceptable surplus of eyes. Over the next weeks, changes unfolded that would have been unimaginable months before. Concord observers arrived in orbit and on the ground. They wore neutral colors and carried devices that fed data not only to Kherrix hierarchies, but to Orionic Pinnacle. Serethi workers elected representatives to new councils. At first, the Kherrix intended these to be symbolic. The representatives, many of them people Irene had mentored in kitchen table workshops, had other ideas. They debated working conditions openly. They demanded transparent safety protocols. They chastised Kherrix supervisors in front of Concord monitors. They made use of the language of the code with a fluency that impressed even Elira. Nyla shifted her vlog content again. "Today," she told her followers one afternoon, "I'm not going to show you tear gas or protests. I'm going to show you a Serethi council arguing about waste disposal." Her viewers complained at first, but she persisted. "You want to know what freedom looks like?" she said. "It looks like boring meetings. It looks like people arguing about garbage instead of hiding from soldiers. Pay attention. Pax Hollis, once released after intense diplomatic pressure and a barrage of exculpatory footage, found himself famous. He hated it. They made you into a symbol," Malik told him gently. "I'm just a guy who likes games," Pax said. "Yes," Malik said, "and you were almost turned into a scapegoat for a bomb you didn't set. That's exactly why your story matters." Pax, reluctantly at first, used his streams to talk about due process, about fear, about being in a cell wondering if anyone would believe him. His audience, surprisingly, listened. Karun Syed's final Galaxy Watch special on Sereth opened with a shot of a tourist kneeling to tie a Serethi child's shoe. "This is not a war story in the traditional sense," he said in voiceover. "No armies marched, no fleets clashed in orbit. The Thessian Code's prohibitions held, and yet an empire was forced to pull back, not because another empire's guns were bigger, but because 10,000 civilians refused to look away." He showed Harlan teaching dance moves that were really shield formations. He showed Irene coaxing quiet workers into speaking their grievances aloud. He showed Jasek standing on a crate in a factory floor, rallying his people not to violence, but to vigilance. "Humans love to think of themselves as special," he said. "Maybe we are not uniquely brave or uniquely cruel, but we are uniquely gifted at arguing with reality, at spotting the gap between what is written and what is lived, and shoving our foot in that gap." On Orionic Pinnacle, Arbiter Thaleen drafted new essays, to become amendments later, about the role of civilians in the Concord's design. She wrote about unintended consequences, about the necessity of evolving law. She cited footage from Sereth, testimony from Serethi and humans alike. She did something few arbiters had done before. She admitted, in official language, that the code had been incomplete. The Thessian Code must recognize civilian solidarity as distinct from martial aggression, she wrote. To do otherwise is to condemn oppressed populations to darkness and demand that the galaxy remain politely ignorant. She sent a copy to Elira Boone. Elira read it in her quarters, the pale light of Orionic Pinnacle Station reflected in her eyes. We changed something, she thought. The cost had been high. It would not be the last such cost, but it was a start. Eventually, the time came for some of the tourists to go home. Malik stood on a Port Halcyon observation deck, watching the ISS Wayfarer Crown prepare for departure. The port was busier now than when they had arrived. Concord inspectors moved alongside Kherrix customs agents. Serethi workers bustled with a little less tension in their steps, though the weight of occupation had not vanished. Jasik joined Malik at the viewport. You'll leave, Jasik said. We'll still be here. Yes, Malik said. This was never our home to stay in. Jasik nodded slowly. You know, he said, when I first saw you, I was furious. You walked around my broken streets like sightseers. Malik did not protest. He had seen that rage in Jasik's face, in others. And now? Malik asked. Now I understand that sometimes you have to let strangers in so that your captors will stop pretending you are invisible, Jasik said. I don't like owing anyone anything, but if I must, owing it to nosy humans is tolerable. Malik chuckled. We'll take that as a compliment, he said. Thaleen approached carrying a small data crystal. This, he said to Malik, is a full WhisperNet log of the last months, censored for security, obviously, but it might be useful for your people. Malik took it with respect. Thank you, he said. And for what it's worth, Thaleen, your techniques will inform how we do this elsewhere. Elsewhere, Jasik echoed, grim amusement surfacing. Already planning your next tourist invasion? Already being asked for it, Malik said. People talk, they share, they noticed. Jasik's gaze drifted back down to Sereth. We have a long way to go, he said. The Kherrix are still in our sky. Their signals still pollute our news feeds. Their taxes still bleed our work. You'll get there, Irene said, joining them. You've already done the hard part. What's that? Jasik asked. Admitting that you deserve more, she said, and showing that you're willing to risk something to get it. Karun, standing nearby with his bags, activated his recorder one last time on Sereth. Final thoughts, he said softly into the mic. Humans like endings. We like to put borders around stories, say, it began here and ended here. The truth is messier. He looked at Malik, at Jasik, at Irene, at Thaleen, at the streams of anonymous tourists in Serethi moving through the port. Operation Postcard didn't end the Kherrix Dominion, he said. It didn't free Sereth, but it did something the Thessian Code alone couldn't. It reminded an empire that the rest of the galaxy is watching, and it reminded the galaxy that sometimes being present is the most dangerous thing you can be. He stopped recording and smiled, tired and sincere. See you out there, he murmured to no one in particular. When the Wayfarer crown lifted from Port Halcyon, Malik watched Sereth recede. He thought of all the worlds in the Concord where petitions sat unanswered, where laws were used as shields against shame. He thought of Irene's wrinkled hands lifting a protest sign, of Pax shaking in a detention cell, of Nyla asking a guard, "Is this normal?" He thought of Arbiter Thaleen penning amendments, of Elira Boone standing alone in a chamber full of skeptics and carving space with words. Humanity had not come to Sereth as conquerors. They had come as what they were, restless, argumentative, technologically messy, stubbornly empathetic travelers. The Thessian Code had said no armies, so they sent tourists. From the stars, Sereth looked untroubled. Closer, it was anything but. And now, at last, it was impossible to pretend otherwise.